Hello, everyone. I see that numbers at the bottom of my screen are slightly going up as participants are joining. I feel this is a good time to welcome you into the new year and into this new In Conversation With series. This webinar is organized and run by the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport, and it is the next generation forum who has selected the speaker for today. My name is Stephanie Ezra. I will be your host. I work for Mont McDonald and have had the chance to work on a diversity of projects from scenario development workshops with governmental bodies to low traffic neighborhoods, as well as major rail infrastructure projects. In parallel, I'm the vice chair for the Next Generation Forum. If you're unfamiliar with this forum, our aim is to support career development of people considering, establishing, or pivoting into the field of transport, logistics, and supply chain. For example, I am new to the industry. I spent 10 years working as an architect, and now I am among your midst. Our committee is passionate in ensuring that logistics, supply chain, and transport careers become more accessible to people, whatever their backgrounds. In this series of events, members of the Next Generation Forum will hold conversations with senior professionals from various facets of our field about and speak about their careers and highlight what they wish to share with the audience. Our aim is to provide people with the ability to learn more and understand different sectors within our industry. During the event, please send your questions in via the Q&A function on Zoom, and we will address them at the end. Additionally, if you have any comments or general feedback, please use the chat function. Today, I have the pleasure of conversing with Daniela Paddeu from the University of West of England, Bristol, where she is a senior researcher at the Centre for Transport and Society. Her background is in sustainable freight solutions, and she has been designing and delivering research projects on this topic in the UK and Europe for nearly a decade. Welcome, Daniela.
Hi, Steph. Thank you very much. That makes me feel a bit old now. But yes, thank you very much for the invite.
So I wanted to start off our conversation by asking you to maybe take a few moments and share your experience with us today. Tell us take us on a journey about how you got to where you are today, and if it is what you expected. And maybe you can finish off by telling us what your current role and your focus is.
Yeah, so I am originally from Italy, from Sardinia, which is actually a very nice island in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. And there I grew up, and then I decided I want to study engineering, civil engineering. So my background is actually civil engineering. And during my study, my bachelor degree, I studied structural engineering, hydraulics, and then there was also something about transport, which was like more general topics about transport engineering, road infrastructure. It was mainly about design and delivery of civil engineering projects related to roads. And among the three parts, so structures, hydraulics, and transport, I was quite fascinated and I wanted to know more about transport. So I decided to follow my studies and to do a master's in transport engineering. And again, during my master's, it was all about engineering, buildings and facilities and roads, infrastructure, ports, everything related to transport, but still construction. And it was nice, but I wasn't really feeling it was my thing. So I was mainly attracted by the modules that were into economics or stakeholder aspects of transport. And then I had the opportunity to take 2 optional modules. And there was a chance for me to know more about freight. So I actually, that is how I got in touch. That was my first date with freight. It was like an optional module in freight transport and logistics. And it was mainly about supply chain management, and ports and shipping, because that was what the research center at that university was mainly working on. It was mainly shipping and maritime transport. And I liked it. I liked all the aspects related to looking at the different stakeholders involved. So it wasn't just about building ports or building infrastructure. It was actually designing systems and making them work, understanding who is involved in the transport system, understanding what the needs of these people are, of the different stakeholders are. And therefore I decided I wanted to do a dissertation on freight. And something that I didn't learn during the module, but I actually did some research about, was urban freight. So last mile deliveries and sustainable urban freight. And I asked my professor at that time, can I do I would like to do the dissertation with you, but as you don't work on this kind of projects, I was wondering if I can actually go somewhere else to spend some time abroad. And I was lucky enough that at that time, sounds quite a long time ago, it was 2012, the Center for Transport and Society at UE Bristol, where I work at the moment, they were running a European project on an evaluation of different measures. And one of these was the Urban Consolidation Center serving Bristol and Bath. And that sounded like a great opportunity for me to join and to actually be involved in the project. So I spent 8 months at CTS working on the evaluation of the Urban Consolidation Center. And everything was so exciting and different. And the more I was learning about urban freight and freight transport, the more I was understanding. I was a kind of fake civil engineer, because I studied a lot of civil engineering, but I didn't really enjoy it that much as I was enjoying it doing my dissertation. And then I really liked it. And I was offered the opportunity to work at my research center in Italy after my master's. So I started working with them on a series of different projects, again, mainly related with port and maritime transport. But then I also decided to do a PhD. And my PhD, I wanted it to be focusing more on sustainable urban freight. So I've been studying quite a lot how to create performance metrics and measures and systems to understand how and whether and to what extent these solutions to make urban freight more sustainable are actually effective. And that was my PhD. It was nice, exciting, but also, I don't know if any of the people in the audience have experienced a PhD. Is actually a very frustrating experience as well, because you ask a lot of questions, and most of the time you don't get the answers, or you have to reformulate the questions because actually you're not going to get the answers. So it's challenging, but then when you get the answers, it's actually quite rewarding because it's very exciting. And I've been working at the University of Cagliari for 4 years in Italy, and I had the opportunity to explore different things, mainly related to freight, also other projects related to passengers. And then I felt like it was my time to move on and to go somewhere else. So I had the opportunity in 2017 to join the Center for Transport and Society in Bristol at University of West of England to work on a project on autonomous vehicles. It was a Innova UK project, which was, again, very interesting, very new. I'm quite an enthusiastic person, as you can, maybe you can actually feel it, but I'm usually very passionate about what I do. And when I joined CTS, I was contacted by the UK government, and they said, "Oh, Daniela, we're contacting you because you are one of our national experts on freight. And we would love you to tender for a review about the impact of automation on freight transport and handling systems." And to be honest, I thought it was an error because I had just finished my PhD. I was an expert on what I did, but I didn't feel I was an expert enough to be like a national expert in the UK, where I had just moved, and to be helping the government to understanding and to explore the future of freight. So I thought I contacted my line manager saying, I received this email, but I think there might be a mistake. Maybe they sent it to anyone, just all the academics in the UK. But I actually discovered quite soon that there are very few people working on freight. I would say this could be extended to Europe, but in the UK, it's actually a very, very niche topic and field. So since I joined CTS, I've been quite busy at working on a series of different projects related to UK freight decarbonisation to support, I mean, all of these projects have policy implications. So we've been supporting the FT with the decarbonisation strategy. Not the strategy itself, but we've contributed to a work on the role of technologies on UK transport decarbonisation, and I was supporting on freight. And then I've been working on a series of other projects funded by research councils in the UK that are interested in understanding how to decarbonize transport. And again, I was the person working on freight. And so I combined and I learned quite a lot about new technologies, automation, the future of freight, and the UK freight decarbonisation, or in general, how to reduce carbon emissions from freight. So I can say now, after 5 years working at CTS, I am quite an expert, even though in a niche sector, and I quite enjoy what I do. So yeah, I'm a senior researcher now there, and I'm the freight specialist of the center.
Thank you for this rundown. I'm very excited to be asking you more questions. Very interesting to hear how quickly you got over a syndrome that I know I've faced, which is imposter syndrome, where you start off and you're like, wait, no, people think of me as an expert in something. They must have the wrong person. But no. And here you are on this panel as well, representing the freight industry and also showing that it is a very niche sector, specifically in the academic world, where not every person thinks of turning when they are interested in transport. Thank you very much for highlighting that aspect. Is there something else? I mean, how is climate change coming into play with the sector that you've become really well involved with? How is it affecting the logistics and freight industry in the UK, for example?
Yeah, well, I can turn this question on the other way around. So how is the logistics sector impacting contributing to climate change? Because I think it's a kind of loop. You don't understand, who is causing what, who is challenging what. Because, for example, I don't know if you know, but the UK is the first market in Europe for e-commerce, and is the third in the world after the US and China. So if you think of the proportion, it's quite massive, the market in the UK. And this, of course, has a big impact on climate change. So the logistics sector, and especially last mile deliveries, are quite a big contributor to carbon emissions. Transport, as I mentioned, the UK transport decarbonisation strategy earlier, because the government has invested quite a lot in, and it's quite ambitious actually, the UK government, in reducing carbon emissions from transport. And freight represents about 1/3 of carbon emissions from transport. So it's quite significant, the contribution of freight. On the other hand, it's also important to understand how the logistics sector and the freight sector is responding to this emergency. So is the logistics sector just working on economic KPIs? So like making profit, delivering what they have to deliver, ensuring customers are loyal and happy? Or are they really, do they really care about the environment and what the impact of their activities is on the climate? I have to say that I had the opportunity to work on a series of projects related to decarbonisation and to involve a series of different stakeholders from the freight industry as well. And most of them, or all of them, are quite engaged, and they really care, and they say they want to of course, they need to make profit, but at the same time, they really who like to do the right thing. So most of them have already implemented strategies, internal strategies to reduce carbon emissions. But at the same time, I have to say, I found there is a big difference between bigger companies, bigger operators and smaller operators, because the logistics sector, especially with last mile deliveries, is mainly made by bigger giants and then very smaller operators. And sometimes the bigger giants are, of course, much more willing to invest in cleaner technologies like electrification, electric vehicles, or hydrogen, as the government is suggesting now, or even methane, cleaner fuels to reduce carbon emissions from freight movements. And smaller operators are less, it's not that they're less willing to do that, but they are less willing to take the risk of investing in these cleaner technologies. Also because I have to say directions from the government are not really clear, or are not clear enough for a smaller operator to be investing and spending money on specific technologies. And then looking into the future is very uncertain. So if they make the wrong decision now, they might have a strong impact on their operations. So it might be quite challenging for them to survive in terms of staying in the market if they make the wrong decisions in terms of decarbonization strategy.
Totally. It must be a very hard position to be in as a company trying to decide what type of new fuel they should invest in for the fleet that they want to renew. Great to hear that people are maybe helping find an answer to that question, by helping the government decide that maybe we might need a diversity of fuels and we can't just rely on one type like we've relied on for the past, well, hundreds of years,
Yeah.
100 of years. How is this going to be affecting, let's say, the growth in e-commerce, and how is last mile freight being affected by this? What should we be looking out for?
Yeah, so the e-commerce is quite a strong thing, a big thing in the UK in terms of impact and numbers and volumes. And to be honest, the policies offered by many retailers about same-day delivery, next-day delivery, or free return shipping, it's not really, it encourages people to buy more and buy stuff that they don't need sometimes. So they actually decide they buy them and then they want to return them. And they say return is free, but it's actually not really free. It's free, you perceive it's free because you don't pay for it, but actually society is paying for it. So it's quite challenging from the freight industry to look into end consumers' needs and expectations now, which are quite high and quite demanding, and at the same time reduce their impact in terms of carbon emissions and air quality as well, so polluting emissions in general. So I would say that encouraging end consumers to buy less or to make more sustainable choices towards the way the products they want to buy, but also the way they want them to be delivered to their own places is going to be a game changer in terms of helping and supporting the freight industry to reduce their emissions. Also because it's quite expensive to manage. So it's not just a matter of reducing emissions, it's also a matter of reducing costs for companies. So something like reducing or changing policies that retailers offer, like same day, same hour sometimes, which are impossible to optimize from a load factor perspective. So completely changing or like asking people to pay for those kind of services rather than giving them for free and making them feel convenient. They're convenient. There might be a big game changer in terms of changing behavior of end consumer and supporting the freight industry to reduce costs and also emissions from their operations.
Okay, do you think one day maybe as a consumer there'll be an option of saying, I would like my parcel to be delivered by e-bike and I will pay for it to be sent back by the same mode?
Yeah, so there are some companies that are operating at the moment that they already offer e-bike deliveries, or retailers. There are actually some experiments going on very new companies at the moment. They approached me and they said they want to offer end consumers the opportunity to actually choose an e-bike if they want to. So it's driving behavior of consumers to make them feel they can take the chance to make a more sustainable choice in terms of deliveries as well. It can be any bike, it can be a pack station, which is like the Amazon lockers thing, as long as end consumers go there to collect their parcel walking or cycling, not by car. It could be quite beneficial to the industry as well, because you reduce emissions, you reduce also the number of missed deliveries, which is when they go to at home, they don't find anyone and they have to go and do the delivery again. So it's extra cost, extra mileage to be traveled by drivers, and extra emissions as well.
Well, I'm sure that urban deliveries are the mass of the clients. How is this being looked at for rural deliveries? Because my background, I come from a very rural part of France, and yeah, sometimes I had things delivered because it's the way it is. You spend technically less time on the road yourself to go and get one article from a store where it actually might not be on the shelf, and you might have to come back home and order it online.
Yeah, so this is very interesting, because I've been leading a project for the local government association last year, and we had a lot of conversation towards differences between rural and urban in terms of last mile deliveries. And as you can imagine, there are different needs and different requirements for rural versus urban. People are more interested in urban because we're going towards urbanization. So we expect people to live more in cities than rural areas, but deliveries will still need to be done to rural areas as to urban areas. So there might be different solutions for rural areas and last mile deliveries in rural areas. There are a lot of extra challenges in rural areas at the moment, like finding the right address because of the broadband doesn't work very well everywhere. So there are some issues for the drivers at the moment to find the right address when they have to do the delivery. So they spend extra time because you are in rural areas, because of the infrastructure of rural areas that is different. And also because you have issues in finding the right destination, the right address for the destination of last mile deliveries. So we've been discussing about using existing facilities like rural shops or pubs, or any kind of like the library, for example, some cases, to actually offer or combine collection services, like using those points as collection points for rural residents to go and collect their own parcels in order to, again, support the freight industry with these challenges related to rural last mile deliveries as well.
I didn't realize that that did not exist in the UK. It's something that's been quite common in France for the past 5 years, maybe, where your local shop is your drop-off point and pickup point for parcels.
Yeah, it's becoming more and more popular now in urban areas. It's less common in rural areas, but we've been discussing quite a lot with a series of different local authorities from England, everywhere in England. They were quite positive towards the idea of using this kind of hubs, collection points, also because it can have a positive impact on the local economy as well. So it's actually beneficial. It's a win-win, basically.
Yeah. Yes.
And I
Until the
have to
local
say,
shop
France,
gets overrun by
France
parcels.
is a very good example in terms of collection points and pack stations as a solution. So it's been quite, there has been quite a big longevity in terms of being running for such a long time in France and being so successful as well.
Well, it's always great to be able to look and see what's happening elsewhere in the world
Yeah.
and learn from those. So it's great, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it evolves in the UK and what system gets put in place. From your perspective, how can the freight and logistics sector work towards decarbonization objectives that have been set out by the government, for example?
Yeah, okay. So I mentioned earlier the technology side, so investing in cleaner technologies. but we found that it's as much as powerful, or even more powerful sometimes, looking into behavior change or organizational change. So the freight industry can either invest in cleaner technologies, but at the same time also invest in working more closer to the other stakeholders or to end consumers. So, for example, working with their customers, which are usually the retailers, to encourage them to change policies and to make end consumers feel they can make the right decision, or a more sustainable decision as well. So try to drive behavior change for end consumers is one thing that they can do. Another thing they can do, which again is being very, very studied for quite a long time, it was also part of my PhD, is to collaborate with stakeholders. So collaborative schemes are can be quite powerful, and the freight industry, so logistics operators at any kind of stage of the supply chain, they can actually collaborate to reduce flows and inefficiencies across the supply chain, and at the same time also carbon emissions. Again, if we go back to climate change, the main challenge with this is that in theory it's wonderful because you can actually make a better world, and also too easy operations for the logistics sector. But in the reality, in the real world, this is quite challenging to achieve, because different stakeholders with different interests, they will be required to share information, and these information are usually commercially sensitive, and usually the freight industry is not really willing to share this kind of information with their competitors because of commercial reasons. So it's a quite, again, I've been studying this for quite a long time now, and like something like urban consolidation centers work quite well in theory, if you reach the critical demand. So with mandatory schemes, there are two types of consolidation centers. Those who are within mandatory schemes, where all the retailers have to use them, and those work quite well. And those that are like within voluntary schemes, where you can choose if you want to join or not. And sometimes, or most of the times, those don't reach the financial viability, just because retailers who are happy with their deliveries, they don't want to change them. So I think stakeholder collaboration and stakeholder collaboration and organizational change could be key drivers to support the freight industry to change and to reduce carbon emissions.
Okay, and just to clarify, when you speak about stakeholders, who are you speaking about?
Yeah, right. You're right. Good question. Sorry, just because I'm very used to it, but it's actually a very overused term. So with freight stakeholders, within freight stakeholders, I would include the freight sector, so logistics operators, carriers, and shippers, and also retailers, and also policymakers, who are the ones who make decisions about making a scheme mandatory, for example, in a public area, public space, so like compulsory consolidation centers, for example. And these policymakers can be local, regional, or national. And also there might be other external groups, like, for example, if we look into cleaner technologies, the energy sector is another big group of stakeholders that could be involved and engaged and collaborate with the freight industry to make freight more sustainable.
And in the UK, there's quite a lot of railways, so I'm guessing the freight industry is not just road-based when it comes to deliveries.
Well, 77% of deliveries are by road in the UK. Rail is quite expensive, especially for short to medium distances. It's convenient only for medium to long distances. This is like an overall rule, but especially in the UK, where you have private companies running railway services, it becomes quite difficult to make the case to use rail against road, because it becomes very expensive for companies to use it. So again, this is an opportunity for the government, for example, to intervene and reduce costs related to railway to encourage modal shift.
Yeah, and to see how it can evolve its strategic road network to accommodate the
Yeah.
industry in the coming 10, 15 years.
Yes.
I'll look forward to seeing what the next road investment strategy comes out. DFT will look like. I wanted to get more into some advice questions. I was curious if you could share maybe a highlight of your career so far.
This is difficult. So I've been very lucky. I'm very, very grateful to the opportunities I had and to the UK, because since I joined, I had the opportunity to really work on very, very exciting projects. And being, as I said, one of the few people working on freight, it means that you actually touch stuff that are very, very big and impressive and exciting. Probably, if I have to pick some highlights, I would say I would pick the review that I led for the Government Office for Science on the impact of automation on freight and handling systems. So that was part of the Foresight project, which was looking into the future of transport and future of mobility. And this is the thing I mentioned earlier about I was contacted by the government and they told me, oh, you're one of our experts. I said, oh my God, this might be wrong. This must be wrong. So it was very exciting. It was my very big first project where I was leading and with a strong policy impact. So it has been quite good for my career and for my CV as well. It wasn't a massive project, but it was very, very, it was a kind of seed corn project for me in terms of professional development, because it actually helped me to start working on building up experience on the future of freight. And then I've been working with Mott MacDonald actually on a couple of works for DFT on the future of freight, which were also very, very interesting about scenarios and what the future might look in 2040, 2050, which was very, very exciting. And then a series of other projects I've been working with Glenn Lyons recently on scenario planning. So again, looking into the future of transport, imagining what the future will look like, and trying to understand what kind of directions we have to take if we want to reach the most preferable futures that we want to achieve, to live in. So yeah, also the later works on freight decarbonization, as well as the other one on automation and the projects on autonomous vehicles helped me to build some credibility in terms of professional background on automation and freight. Also, the other projects funded by the UK government and also the research councils on freight decarbonization helped me to be much more I was interested already, so I wouldn't say much more interested, but much more to deep dive into specific issues related to the freight industry and to look into different perspectives from a range of different stakeholders. So that helped me to actually set the scene and understand what was going on and what everyone was perceiving was going on, and therefore how actually all of the stakeholders could work together to create a better future.
Okay. I'm working towards a better future. It feels like the logistic and the freight industry is such a mammoth of an industry. How is it gonna, well, how easy is it gonna be to get people to move and change their habits and think of how to reach this preferable future?
That's the most challenging thing. So behavior change is the most powerful solution, but it's also the most difficult to achieve. So it's not a thing that you can actually, it's not a short-term solution. So you will really need to implement a lot of different things to be able to achieve behavior change in the mid or long term, and to make people feel they can make better choices if they want a better future. Otherwise, they won't actually get a better future. It is going to be, I don't want to be negative. I'm usually very positive. I'm a very positive person, but if we stick with the decisions we're making today, we're not going to get a very nice future. So it's very, very important to understand that everyone needs to understand where the responsibility lies and who is responsible for what, and what everyone can do to actually contribute to a change and to drive the change as well.
To make sure it's our choice before it's, say, imposed future.
Yes, yeah. So I think this is what I learned in the last 10 years working on stakeholder engagement. It's important that everyone knows, everyone is engaged, and everyone feels part of something to make sure that they actually can contribute to a real change to make a better future. Otherwise, people just feel they are passive actors, just looking at what is going on, receiving directions and indications of what they have to do, but they don't understand why they have to do what they have to do. So co-creation, stakeholder engagement are very, very powerful tools that we use quite a lot, and I've been using quite a lot in the last 4 to 5 years to make people feel more aware and more active towards driving a change.
Okay. So when it comes to driving a change, obviously in your paid work, you are working to help people understand the change that needs to happen. Have you been doing any kind of volunteer work or activities outside of your regular job that helps you contribute towards your professional and personal development? Asking this as we are the Next Generation Forum to try and understand how I and my colleagues can better improve our skills in order to reach higher heights.
Yeah, so the first thing that comes to my mind is I volunteer to be part of the CILT Southwest Regional Committee. So it's a volunteering activity, but it's actually very, very helpful to get closer to the industry. And it's very powerful for networking as well, which has been, I think it's my strongest skill, networking, but it's very important because then you are aware of what is going on in different parts of the UK, of the world, and also in different companies. And there might be different approaches that you are not aware of, and you actually learn from meeting people and listening from people. And also I feel like being part of the regional committee, I feel like I'm active and I play an active role in making decisions or informing CILT of what is going on the academic side, because there are 3 of us, 3 academics in the committee, and I'm not the only, I'm not anymore the only female member of the committee, which is kind of win thing for me, because this has been quite challenging since the beginning, being just the female, the younger female in a group usually. But yeah, it's so being part of something like the Next Generation, as you're part of, or a regional committee or a specific committee within CILT is quite helpful, I would say, especially for younger people or younger professionals who are approaching this world. So you get to know people, get to know things and opportunities as well. Another thing that I do is I am part of an editorial board of the journal Transport, which is a journal of civil engineering. And that's, let's say, another group. I mean, CILT is very industry focused. So you get mainly people from industry, which is good, because I've been working in academia only, even though with a lot of people from industry. But I have the opportunity to look at the other side of it and look into, like what the real sector does and what they think. On the other side, being part of the editorial board of the journal, I look into academics and what academia is doing in different parts of the world, not just the UK, which makes me go back to your previous comment about France. So you learn about other experiences, best practices, and now and whether and when you can actually transfer those best practices to this country, if possible, or the opposite. How can we actually export our practices somewhere else to make a better place, a place that is not nice at the moment. So I think both looking into industry and academia was quite powerful for me, being part of something. And also being an academic, I do a lot of conferences, which is also very good for networking and awareness of what is going on. And maybe if you're not an academic, you might join professional conferences for professionals, transport professionals, which are very good, again, for networking and also increase awareness about what is going on in different parts of the country or the world.
Okay, so meet people and ask questions. Stay
Yes.
aware of what happens around you. Very good.
Yeah.
Comes naturally. I'll keep doing that.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the industries, you said obviously SAILT is very industry centric. Do you feel as though there's looming skill gaps? I mean, what is missing and what can inspire or promote a career in our field?
Yeah, well, I think we all know about the issue with the AGV driver shortage we experienced in the UK. It was a problem in the US a long time ago. Some time ago, but it came now to the UK as well. And it's going to be a broader issue, not just nationally, but it was going to be a European issue and then a worldwide issue. In the UK, for example, the average age of AGV drivers is something between 50 to 54 years old. So drivers are quite old and they are retiring or they are in good conditions, physical conditions to be driving long hours. So that's an issue. So understanding how to engage different profiles of people, like younger people or females, to become an AGV driver. So encourage them to learn to drive an AGV or to learn more about freight, to actually help with the shortage that we have at the moment. And this lack of skills or interest towards freight, I would say, is it can be extended to other sectors as well. So it's within the industry, there might be a series of different profiles that are now required, but we don't have capacity. So, for example, when I led the project for the local government association, there was a general lack of capacity and capabilities on freight. So local authorities, they don't have enough knowledge or experience with freight, just because transport planning is usually focused on people rather than goods. So it hasn't been a problem until now. It's becoming a very significant increasing problem to solve in the UK. We don't have skilled people to solve it, which is an issue, and it's a pity. And one of the evidence of this is that, for example, I work at University of West of England. We have a master's in transport engineering and planning. We don't have a module on freight. How is that possible? So I do teach freight across different modules, but that's not the focus. We don't have even one module that focuses on freight. How can we expect people, next generation professionals, to be skilled in freight if we don't actually teach them enough? And I do lead a module for another master's that is called engineering management, which is like broader, but my module is, again, optional as the one I took when I was studying. And my module is called logistics and supply chain management, which is, I mean, it's good because you get an overall understanding of supply chain management. It's very broad because you can't really do everything in just one module, but it's fine enough. I'm happy enough. And I found that students are becoming more and more interested in freight and supply chains. And we get a lot of students from abroad coming because they want to do the module on supply chains. So it's rewarding, to be honest. It's it's nice to hear people are getting more and more interested. I think it's just a matter of understanding how to build capacity and capabilities across different sectors within the industry and across the different stakeholder groups again. So it's not just the freight industry, it's also policymakers and overall the general public as well. Because the first question I ask when I run a lecture on freight is, have you ever heard about freight? Do you have any experience, a personal experience with freight? And everyone says no. And then I show a picture, which is like Deliveroo, supermarkets, online shopping, Amazon. Have you ever done any of these activities? And they say yes. So you're the first responsible for generating freight flows. You should know something about freight. It's kind of unacceptable that it's not part of the curriculum of a master's or a program considering transport.
The master's I did in transport planning and engineering just last year, same, we did not have a freight dedicated module. It was up to me to tailor the topics, the coursework that I had to fill out to investigate areas that I was interested in. And I definitely did try and dig in a little bit into freight, understand last mile deliveries, and find out also, for example, how a computer comes from China all the way to my doorsteps in the UK. What path does it take, and
Yeah.
which one is more carbon less, should we say? But no, okay. So education definitely is one of the big gaps. Making sure people are aware that yes, freight rules their everyday lives, and you can't do anything. You can't go and buy anything in a store without it being brought to you by freight.
Yeah. I'll communicate. I mean, I don't want to feel like I'm sending a message everyone should do a master's in freight transport. It's not what I'm saying. But if you have decided to study transport, it's good that you get freight within. I mean, in the recipe, it's not just a kind of optional ingredient. It's something that is tasteful and it's very complex. And this is why I got passionate, because it's very, very complex. It's a very complex matter. So it's important to consider it as well, especially because now we know that a third of carbon emissions, at least in the UK, are due to freight. So it's an important challenge.
Totally. Very, very good. I want to take this opportunity to let everyone know, if they want to put questions in the Q&A, feel free to. I only have 1 or 2 questions left for Daniela, so then we can turn our attention to questions. So I wanted to get a bit more of a personal feel, kind of what are, let's say, 3 pieces of advice that you'd pick, that you've picked up in your career, and if you could go back in time and tell your younger self, what advice would you share with yourself?
So I would hug myself, I think, because it has been very, very, very scary, especially at the beginning, because it was new. So again, I think I've been quite brave in my decisions, because I actually went against the flow. Everyone was going into constructions while I was studying civil engineering, and I went into transport and economics. And then everyone was going into passengers, so road infrastructures. And I went into freight and urban freight and stakeholder engagement. So I would tell myself, don't be scared. If you feel like you like it, just go ahead. It's worth it. It's going to be worth it and rewarding, you will see. And another thing I would tell myself is also, myself not as a student, but as a younger professional when I started, is also don't be scared again of being the only female in a room, plenty of males. Don't be scared to tell your opinion and to make sure everyone is listening to you. Don't be scared, don't feel you're an imposter, because I've been feeling an imposter for a very long time. Sometimes I still feel it. But it's okay. Everyone knows you're just at the early stage of your career. You're doing good. And this is going to be quite an important thing, what you're doing. So just go ahead and do it. And the other thing, the very important one that I learned very recently is make a plan for your career development. Because when I started working on my projects at the beginning, I was just starting on projects I was really enjoying, which was nice because I had fun, I was enjoying the projects, I was learning from the projects, but I wasn't considering how those projects were helping me in becoming someone or going somewhere. So I would say make a plan about, look at the next 10, 15, 20 years. Who do you want to be? How do you get there? So what kind of projects should you be working on? What kind of role should you be having in these projects? How can that help you to build up your CV to actually become who you want to be?
I like
Be
that.
strategic.
Oh yes, I will be taking that to heart, and I will sit down tomorrow and make a plan.
Yeah.
Sounds very good, because being new in this profession, I mean, I used to have a plan in my last profession, and I have not had time to sit down and actually think of where I want to be in even just 5 years' time.
Yeah.
I've been happy just discovering new things and learning how big this very small sector, transport I've been involved with, how big it actually is.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
Just ask
so
yourself questions about who you want to be, what do you like, and what do you think you need to be who you want to be.
I will note this down. Thank you very much. There is one question in chat. It is from Sudat Wasnik, and I'll read it out to you. So he's loved to hear your journey into freight. He found that very interesting. Um, Apologies if you've already said it, but when you said you're researching on automation, could you please specify what automated technology you're working on in freight in the UK? And is it, for example, delivery robots or CAVs or
Yeah.
something else?
Yeah, so when I moved to the UK, I started working on projects related to autonomous vehicles for people, not for freight. So I've been working on 2 or 3 Innovate UK projects that were delivering the technology. Connected and autonomous vehicles, CAFs, to move people around, not really freight. And then when I was contacted by the Government Office for Science, I was asked to do the review on freight. So that was my first opportunity to look into existing technologies worldwide, to see how these technologies can be actually used to improve efficiency across different modes and different processes in the supply chain. So we looked, I would suggest you actually, the report has been published by the Government Office for Science. So if you just Google my name and then put new technologies and automation in freight, you will get the report, but it considers different modes. So it considers road, railways, ports, and it considers also the urban environment. So looking into smaller robots to do the deliveries, for example, public perception. So it's mainly towards technologies, but it also considers other factors such as public acceptance, public perception and acceptance of these technologies, as well as implications for the workforce, for example, and ethics issues related to automation as well. So I think that's the most comprehensive piece of work I can direct you to.
That sounds like an interesting one. This is a piece of work we should also pick up in when we do a published article of this conversation. We'll highlight this work. There's another question from Stephen Craig. Any resistance from the logistic companies you may want to see more rather than who may want to see more rather than fewer deliveries to behavioral policies in order to reduce consumption?
Hi, Stephen. Thank you for the question. So actually, the issue, so this was a point that was made, quite a strong point, during a couple of, more than a couple of meetings and workshops I ran. But the resistance was more from the politics participating in the workshops than the logistics sector, because actually the logistics companies, they know it's quite challenging. So I'm not saying they should do less deliveries, they just should be smarter in the deliveries they do, and they can save money, they can reduce costs. So the logistics sector overall, I would say, is quite positive towards optimizing or improving the deliveries, which means also reducing the number of deliveries or reducing the return flows when we return a product, for example, because that's an extra cost. It's very, very challenging for them. Margins are quite small, it's very risky, so they risk to lose money. It's quite fragmented as well, the freight industry in general, so it's very risky overall. So I would say resistance is not really from logistics, from the logistics sector, is mainly from politicians who feel like people would feel they can't buy what they want to buy, or maybe implications on the economy if people buy less.
So we are at a tipping point where people need to realize that maybe they won't be able to buy what they want all the time, especially if there's no HTV drivers, for example, to deliver it to their door.
Yeah, yes.
There's another question from Sudat, and I think this would be probably the last one, seeing how time's going. Sudat has asked, when you talk about investment in freight to decarbonize it, often we turn towards technology. Isn't there a paradox that technology is used to decarbonize something that in turn creates a new industry, example, manufacturing of that new technology. And as a result, we end up creating more emissions. So according to you, what would be the best way to navigate this issue?
Yeah, that's another very interesting question. So again, the government has been investing quite a lot in understanding what the best technology is, or being a leader worldwide in terms of technologies. I agree with you. So it is very important to understand whether these new technologies are actually improving the situation or making it worse, because manufacturing, electrification is like it sounds like the best solution at the moment, or hydrogen, but actually what does that mean in terms of emissions? And also another big issue is about supply. So we don't have at the moment in the UK enough electricity or hydrogen to power the whole UK fleet and to switch to electric vehicles for the whole fleet. So I think I don't have an answer to this question. I have more questions to ask, to add to your question, which is actually we really need to make sure if we go for a technology that this is better, not worse. Also because I mean the issues with the battery in terms of pollution as well, generating extra waste. So there are a series of different questions which are related to where we should go in terms of technology as well. And again, I would say too little attention is paid to behavior change and organizational change, which are very, very powerful to decarbonize freight.
Which leads us to, there's a last question in chat, but unfortunately we're running out of time. So what I suggest is that we take this question and answer it in a written format in Focus magazine for next month, for example. Okay. And we can also answer it in the chat, but it would be a great one to publish. Thank you very much to everyone who has asked questions. Thank you very much, Daniela, for your time, and it was a very pleasant conversation to have with you. I wanted to take this opportunity to speak very quickly about the next In Conversation event that we have. It will be on the 6th of February, and I will be hosting it again, and I'll be speaking with Anna Dalvecchio from EY. The format of that session is going to be slightly different. We're going to be more in a meeting room where a conversation with the audience will be possible, and we'll be using Menti questions to get that conversation going. Daniela, if you want to join us during that next call, feel free to join the audience.
Yeah, I will.
And it will be a great opportunity to learn yet more. So thank you very much, and thank you to everyone who's taken the time to attend over their lunch break.
Thank you, Stephanie. It was very nice. And thank you, everyone.